Well, we're into the third tranche, as the government likes to call it, of workplace law reforms. This was one of the areas Labor did talk about going further on before the election. It has been relatively conservative in plenty of policy areas, but it does want to make changes. Of course, it is a party and part of the unions. The gig economy workers, such as rideshare drivers and food delivery riders, could soon benefit from a major shake-up to Australia's workplace laws. Political reporter Olivia Casey joins me in Canberra. So, Olivia, Tony Burke, the minister here, will introduce new regulations for digital platforms next week. What will that actually mean?
Well, it's the second wave of Labor's workplace reforms. It's called the Closing the Loophole Bill, and it will be introduced to Parliament next week. Now, Industrial Relations Minister Tony Burke, he's used this speech at the Press Club today to argue for the changes that will essentially improve conditions for those working in the gig economy and stop them having to rely on tips, for example, to get by. As we know, the use of digital platforms to basically connect buyers and sellers has grown exponentially over recent years, but often the workers on these platforms, they're deemed to be contractors rather than employees, so they're missing out on crucial benefits such as sick leave or sick pay, for example. We've also seen news and reports of the deaths of food delivery drivers as well, so there's been questions around safety as well. Under the proposed changes, essentially eligible parties will be able to go to the Fair Work Commission and ask for minimum standards in areas such as insurance and also pay. Here is Mr. Burke providing a little bit more detail about his proposal earlier today.
We can't have a situation where we have this growing section of the workforce where they, at the moment, have no minimum standards. If you are an employee, you have a whole series of rights. If you're not an employee, all of those rights, all of them fall off a cliff. What we want to do is turn that cliff into a ramp.
The proposed changes have been welcomed by the union movement. They say that under the status quo, it's depriving workers of basic entitlements as well as basic rights as well. Employer groups, though, perhaps unsurprisingly, are less happy about it. They argue the changes could actually undermine the sector's viability, that being the gig economy. Tony Burke, though, says that this complexity is ultimately needed.
It's true. Having no standards at all is really simple. You don't need to put anything in the Act to provide the levels of protection that we currently have for gig workers. So yeah, it adds something, and it needs to.
The opposition was deeply unhappy with the first tranche of Labor's industrial relations shake-up last year, so it'll be interesting to see how they respond to it, as well as employer groups as well. No doubt plenty of debate when Parliament returns next week, Tom.